We have the next governor of Washington coming on.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. That's my, I'm endorsing him. I don't know if that's going to help him or hurt him. Hey, Mark Mullet.
Hello.
Mullet.
How's it going?
Get on here.
I'm here.
All right. I'm a big fan. Listen, I support you in the governor's race. I'd like you to raise more money. I saw you only have $730,000. You got to get on it, Mark.
Okay. Another 111 showing up next week, so there you go.
Okay.
Okay. We're still in second place, so okay.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, it's all about money, isn't it? Hey, the reason we wanted to have you on is because I've been hearing from a lot of friends that are small landlord owners, and I know that you worked in the last session to get some relief and to bring both sides together. The acrimonious relationship between landlords and tenants, I believe, that is stoked by places like the Seattle City Council. So I won't ask you to speak specifically to some of their rulings, but I see that you're involved in trying to just allow landlords to have properties, allow tenants to peacefully enjoy those properties, and the rent to be paid, and everyone to live in a copacetic, happy life. Would that pretty much sum up how you'd feel about the landlord-tenant relationship?
Well, I feel if you don't appreciate the importance of housing providers, at the end of the day, I think what we've seen the last few years is a lot of the mom and pop landlords are just giving up, and then they put their house on the market. They sell it, and now it's out of the rental pool, which means there's fewer rentals, which means rental prices go up. And so if you don't acknowledge there's a pain point where people will just say, this isn't worth the misery anymore. And if I'm going to not be able to remove people who are a safety risk for others around them, or we're not going to remove people who refuse to pay their rent for whatever reason, then that system's just not going to work.
You know, there was a study.
Well, it's not working now. Yeah, go ahead, Shari.
No, I was going to say this. There's a study, UW Center for Studies in Demographic and Ecology, and they say that 78% of rental owners feel that their perspective on being landlords has been completely ignored. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think that's it's been a really challenging environment lately, and I think, Comeland's got another in this space coming out, and I think it's, if we don't get this balance right, we're going to start to lose more housing providers, and at the end of the day, we need more housing providers in the state, not less, and so we have to get this balance right.
So in King County, speaking specifically, a landlord files for eviction and then it's going to go to court. Legally, it has to happen within 30 days. The King County Court for eviction is hearing 2 to 3 cases a day. So if a landlord wanted to evict somebody and to have it go to court, if they filed last week, it would be heard by the 15th of January. In the meantime,
that's exactly what I'm told.
Right. And so the tenant is sitting in there not paying rent, back on almost a year and a half of rent, and they can't get the person out, and they're losing money every single month because they're paying their taxes, they're paying to have somebody service the apartment, but they're basically being robbed by that tenant. I have noticed, especially in Seattle, speaking to that the people that are in that city council, one, their problem is they see housing as a right. Is housing a right, Mark Mullet?
Well, I think it's a right as long as you pay your bill. I mean, I own a pizza restaurant and ice cream stores, and I always say, my margins are low single digits, and if I had to, if 10% of my customers could choose not to pay me, all my locations would close within a month because none of them would be profitable. So it's a real challenge, I think, that we have to acknowledge that it's a very fair trade-off. You say, we're going to provide housing in exchange for you paying rent and not being a safety risk to others who might be living around you in a rental facility. And I think that is fair. You can't expect people to provide housing for free, just as they wouldn't expect me to provide pizza and ice cream for free.
Right. So if somebody came into your restaurant and one day ate and then left, and then came back in the next day, ate and then left, and they continued to do this over and over again, you would eventually stop that person from coming into your restaurant, or you wouldn't serve that person. The laws in Seattle are written in such a way that that person can, in effect, live in that apartment for as long as they'd like and work the system to the best of their advantage and not pay that landlord. And then that landlord can't get them out of there because, oh, it's racist or something else. So the tenant knows how to work the system and take advantage of the laws that are in place to protect the tenant more than the landlord. There needs to be a balance shifting back, because I think this will have the greatest effect upon the supply-demand, because as you mentioned right at the top, Mark, that small landlords sell, a corporation comes in, knocks down the duplex or the fourplex, and then builds something else that would have 10 units, and each one of those units would be $3,000 or $4,000, and it's a corporation outside of Washington, and they might not be as sensitive to the tenant as maybe the mom and pop would be. So we have a supply-demand problem, and then people talk about affordable housing. Well, this is the beginning of the root of the affordable housing problem. Is there is not enough supply because mom and pop people are being driven out by really bad laws.
Yeah, and I think it's going back to getting the balance right. We need to make our permit process actually predictable and timely so you can actually build a house in our state without risk of a 2 or 3 year permit delay. And then once you have the units built, you need to make sure that the rules are fair for both sides. And so, yeah, you don't want people being discriminated against and getting into housing, but at the same time, for people who aren't paying their housing bill, I mean, we've had some horrible stories around people not paying and even renting out their units on Airbnb and stuff like that, right? And so
yeah.
I think you have to say, well, this isn't going to be allowed. And at the end of the day, this backlog in the system, it just has to be rectified. And if the state has to be a better financial partner to speed up that process, then I think we should step up and do it, because at the end of the day, we need housing providers in the state. We need more housing in the state. We need both. Mm-hmm. And that means the state's going to have to really look at solutions where we might have to provide some financial incentives to local jurisdictions to clear these backlogs so we can move forward in a way of getting more units built.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, are there any solutions that could help in the short term? I mean, it seems like, trying to get legislation passed or all that's sort of like moving a mountain. But meanwhile, there are people like the young man who's got somebody squatting in his house basically and not paying any rent and renting out the basement, or was renting out the basement. There seems like there's just so much bureaucracy involved in trying to get things reversed or at least evened up. Is there something else that can be done in the immediate future or the short term to help some of these people?
I think that I would like to see the state provide some financial incentives to jurisdictions that are willing to actually get their backlogs cleared up. And so rather than handing them a blank check and say, here's money, go do what you want with it, you can say, hey, here's money, but you have to use it for this specific purpose. And the goal is to actually, that would go for permit backlogs. It would go for the court backlogs around the eviction cases. It would go for all of the above, where I think we could be a financial partner with these jurisdictions. And that's an option we can have in this upcoming session that starts in January. Is I think the state has to put some carrots out there that makes it really enticing for cities to rethink how the current status quo is working.
Tacoma on the 7th of November will vote on Measure 1, which is being promoted by a number of socialists. I'm assuming they feel that housing is a right. And it is actually more draconian than what has come out of Seattle. And they're hoping that once it hits Tacoma, it'll spread across the rest of the United States. And you can't raise rent more than, I don't know what the number is. You can't evict. I mean, all sorts of rules. Same sort of thing that's going on in Seattle, but even a little bit worse. Have you seen any of that, Mark? I don't mean to put you on the spot if you're not familiar with what Tacoma's doing.
I'm familiar with the Tacoma initiative, and I hope it fails. I don't think it's good public policy. I don't think it's going to help lead to more housing in the Tacoma region. I think it'll lead to less housing in the Tacoma region. It's not going to attract the private capital we're trying to attract to build the housing we need to build. And I think the Tacoma policy is going in the exact wrong direction of where it should be going. And hopefully the voters in Tacoma realize and appreciate that we need to attract private capital to build housing. The state government does not have enough money to build the amount of units we need to build in the state of Washington. And if we do laws like what Tacoma is considering with that initiative, we're going to deter capital from coming into our state and it's going to have the opposite effect of what we're trying to accomplish, which is we need more homes, not fewer homes. So I really hope that initiative fails.
Well, what do you think the disconnect is here? Because obviously, what you're saying is, if you don't have enough, if you have landlords that understand that, for instance, in the Tacoma thing, if you're a student, you can't be evicted during the school year. You can't. So technically, you could move in on day one and never pay $1 of rent until I guess the school session ends. And if people are smart, I mean, they know how to work the system. So why is it that it's so difficult for officials to not see that this is only going to deter people from being landlords? Why don't they get that equation?
I'm not sure. And I think the other thing is these policies are all making our state unaffordable. My wife and I have huge anxiety. Like, our oldest daughter's a junior up at Western in Bellingham, and we're nervous when she finishes school in 2 years, she won't be able to afford to live in the area where we were born and raised, our parents were born and raised, our grandparents were born and raised. These policies are making Washington unaffordable because at the end of the day, like, if people aren't paying rent, that means you have to raise rent on other people. And so, like, at the end of the day, it's just not fair. Everyone should be playing by the rules. And I think if people play by the rules, that system will work. And I think if the more we have rules that are fair for both sides, the more capital we will attract to our state to build the housing that we need to build. And the state can invest in housing towards lower income brackets, but there's a lot of housing you can build for people in middle income brackets right now where we don't need state investment. We just need rules that aren't adversarial.
Yes. We're talking with a Democratic candidate for governor, Mark Mullet, who, by the way, I'm going to vote for. I'm going to send you some money, Mark, too, because I put my money where my mouth is on this sort of stuff. I am a libertarian, conservative, Republican-leaning individual, but I think in this state, of the choices that are available, I think you are the most reasonable and level-headed individual. Your years at Bank of America, and then as an entrepreneur and a guy in Issaquah raising kids and trying to run a business, you understand. And you don't have a lot of the vitriol that it seems the venom that is spewed back and forth on either side. I think you're respected on the other side of the house as well. So I hope you get in there. I'll just say this, that to me, if you're going to restrict what a landlord can raise the rent for, then you should restrict the property taxes that are being foisted on people. So 2018, King County, 17% property tax increase. 2019, it dropped by 1%. In 2020, it went up 4%. In 2022, it went up 7%. 2023 went up 6.4 increase. So they're increasing the taxes, but you can't increase your rent. So the voters, most of them tenants, let's vote for new parking or new parks, or we'll pay for mental health. Well, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's not going to affect me. I don't own a property, so what do I care about property taxes? But that's a nearsighted, sort of very ignorant view. You don't think the landlord gets the tax and passes it on to the renter? That's just, you're dumb if you don't believe that your rent is going to go up because you voted yes on a tax on a property. But that, again, that's Shari's talking about, that sort of disconnect.
When I say I moved back home back in 2007, and the 15 years after I moved back home, my property taxes, they doubled in that 15-year time span. And, well, that's just not sustainable. Like, if we're going to double our property tax bill every 15 years, in 30 years, none of us will be able to afford to live in the state, not just my kids. Like, we're going to push even, like, every retiree out of the state. So at some point, we got to stop trying to solve all of our challenges by raising property taxes, because it's not a sustainable way for families to be able to afford to solve these problems. And like I say, I think the state, we have revenue. We can be a better financial partner with cities and counties and target that partnership on making sure we're moving the needle on getting permits through quicker and clearing out the court backlogs and doing everything we can so the process works again.
Well, listen, we appreciate you coming on, spending some time with us. How's it going on the campaign trail? Are you enjoying it?
It's been really good. Everyone's learning about the mullet. They all ask why I don't have one, and I tell them if I still had the mullet I had in high school, I don't think I'd be married with 6 kids. I think I'd still be living in a van down by the river. But I don't know.
Yeah, don't go mullet, all right? That's my advice. You don't need to do that. We don't want you in a van down by the river. All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Good luck with everything.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Okay.
Okay. There you are.
Okay.
Mark Mullet without the mullet. running for governor. It's an uphill battle. By the way, the polling in Tacoma has the voters going yes in favor of Measure 1. So, as you point out, Shari, if you're a student, you don't have to pay rent. You can't get evicted. More restrictions on what you can raise on rent. Not checking people's backgrounds for criminal stuff. I mean, just they'll see within a couple of years there'll be less housing in Tacoma, and the prices of apartments and stuff will continue to go up. So, and listen, on the other thing is, I like Dave Reicher a lot. I'm a big Dave Reicher fan. I think he's a good guy. I appreciate that he's running the Republican Party, but in the state of Washington, forget it. I mean, it is just, there's no way you can get the kind of money you need in order to be able to run against the unions that control the state. So that's the way that goes.
Yep.
All right, Shari?
Yep, I think that's a good plan. You got to vote for who you think is going to be the most, viable candidate.
Yeah, Ferguson out of there.